Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Saka here with another episode of Kerbal Space Program 1.2 Tutorial for Beginners. When we last left off, we put a ship into orbit and we were ready to head to Minmus. All we need to do is left-click at the tracking station to view the flights in progress, and we see that we have one ship that our tracking station is tracking, and that is the Kerbal X right there. Just a left click on it and fly, and we will be able to pilot our ship once more. If you haven't got a ship in orbit, then go ahead and get one into orbit. Preferably the Kerbal X if you want to follow along piece by piece, but any ship in orbit with some fuel left will do. Now, we need to plot a maneuver to get to Minmus, and that is what we're going to do. You will notice that we have Valentina, Bill, and Bob in the seat. When I loaded the game, they just sort of popped in there. Don't know what happened, but it's good to see some of the original three. And what we would like to do is get out to Minmus. If we look at our ascending and descending node, we are right on at 0.00 alignment with Minmus. Just give that a left click and make sure that is your target. We have unset right there, which means it is set as a target, and all we have to do is get it to where Minmus is about 90 degrees. Then we will click on the back side of the planet here because we want to raise up this part of our orbit, and we just add a maneuver and speed up. We want to add thrust right here. Our apoapsis is going to climb. We may see an encounter with the moon. If we keep going right there, you saw that encounter with the moon, which I talked about last time, but we're not shooting for the moon, we are shooting for Minmus. Drag our apoaps all the way out until we intersect the orbit, and we get our triangle markers that shows that when we get up to this point and cross this orbital plane, Minmus will be right here. So we're actually in front of it. A left click on the center circle of the maneuver node, we can adjust our timing, and just a little bit of a change and we are right there. At this point, we are going to come up and we are actually going to go past Minmus and then fall back down into its sphere of influence in 11 days. If you wanted to be efficient, this is extra fuel wasted to go past the orbit. Ideally, what we would like is to line up our apoapsis here and here. We want to align Minmus's apoaps with our apoaps, so essentially we will be stopped or nearly stopped when we reach our highest point. The reason this orbit is so elliptical is we're going to fire a lot right here. We're going to pick up a lot of speed to get out to here, but with no further thrusting, Kerbal will continue to pull us back, and we will essentially lose all of our forward momentum right here and then be pulled back into Kerbal. So that is why we want to make sure that our apoaps is close to the planet, because this is our slowest point, and any change in thrust that we make here will be more beneficial. We're not trying to cancel out any other momentum. So according to the computer, we do not have an estimated burn time, which is fine. We only have a little bit of fuel in this section, and then we will detach this section of the rocket and then use this engine, which is hid by this shielding, and this fuel tank right here, which is absolutely fuel to do the work. Since we have Valentina on board, which is a pilot, we can hit the T key to turn on SAS, and we hit the maneuver button, and you see right away these fins start turning, which are not doing anything out here in the vacuum, but that signifies to me as a player that in fact the rocket is moving. Now once we get to this maneuver node right here, I'm going to just go 5 times time acceleration by hitting the caret key, just like that, and now the rocket is stopped. When you are under 5 times time acceleration, you cannot move the rocket. So when you come out of time acceleration, essentially the rocket was frozen in place. So this helps you if you have a wobbly rocket or if you have a rocket that isn't behaving well, you can just do a little bit of time acceleration, freeze the rocket in place, and try again. Let's go ahead and get up to about, say, 30 seconds, I think, would be a good burn time. Whoops, passed it. All right, full throttle. Valentina is keeping us on the mark. When this burns out, we want to hit the space bar to separate, and the space bar again to fire our engine. And we see here that the engine will take 34 seconds. It's not as powerful as our mainsail was. That's attached to that section, but it is far more efficient. This little bit of fuel will be more than enough to get us where we need to go, whereas that huge tank was doing a lot of work for a little bit of result. So once we get closer to 0, we will start throttling back with the left control key. Make sure we do not overshoot. Half throttle about right there. Once we get to 25 meters or so, we will go down to 25% throttle. And then once we hit 0, we will cancel it out. 3, 2, 1, bam. 0.4, a little bit of shift, and 0. Right there. We'll hit the check mark to delete the maneuver node and turn off SAS because we don't want Valentina trying to hold something and constantly rotating this ship while we are on the dark side of the planet. Even though we have 950 charge between these batteries and what the capsule can hold, it would be very bad for us to be floating out there, not have any battery, and these solar panels not be in sunlight, because then we just be at the mercy of physics. So we look at our map and see what we've done. Our projected orbit is in blue. We are going to shoot out over the orbit of Minmus and actually start picking up speed when we encounter Minmus here in 10 days and 5 hours. We will go right by Minmus at 101,000 meters, which is pretty close and good for us. What I'd like to talk about now is the Oberth effect. The Oberth effect essentially says when you are at your periaps, you're getting free energy, and the best way for me to demonstrate that is to do something like this. So say I have undershot Minmus, or, I'm not quite as high as I would like to be. I could, if I was along the orbit here, add a maneuver and speed up. Whoops. Speed up. Now what I would like to do is show you how much speed we would need to leave the Kerbal system. So we're speeding up there. We've left the Kerbal system if we burn about 39 meters a second. But watch what happens if I wait and I burn here at our periaps instead. Well, essentially we're going to crash into the planet, so that's not a good note. But if I add a maneuver and I use the Oberth effect to leave the Kerbal system, right there. Only 9 meters a second, and it's freaking out because essentially we're trying to launch from inside the planet, but the calculation remains. When you are at your highest point in your orbit, you are at your slowest. And as the planet starts pulling you back down, you gain speed. So if you can wait until you are at your absolute fastest to change your speed. What that does is essentially, instead of waiting until we are out here, let's just time accelerate, until waiting when we're out here, when we're only moving 1,300 meters a second, when we come back around, and we wasn't going to hit the planet, we would be moving 2,000 to 3,000 meters a second. So we're gaining essentially 1,000 meters a second for absolutely free. This would be a strategy where if you wanted to go out to, say, Duna, or slow down to, say, Eve, you would actually wait until you hit your periapsis every time to launch just a little bit further and use that effect to greater effect, so you're not burning as much fuel. Essentially, that is the Oberth effect, and when we head out to Duna or we go to Eve in one of our episodes of the tutorial series, I will show off the Oberth effect in more detail. But now we are set. We are on an encounter. We are just floating through space waiting to get there. We can left click right before the change and go warp here. We're going to speed ahead 10 days in a matter of seconds. We can hit the M key and see Kerbal really getting small. And we should see Minmus starting to grow. Where is old Minmus at? Oh, Minmus, where are you? Here it comes. No, there goes the moon. There's Minmus. Minmus is coming. And now our time warp is complete. We are on the back side. We are slowing down. We are only at 62 meters a second. And what this means is that in an hour, we will then be pulled by Minmus. Right now, unlike real life, where there are no Lagrange points, meaning between Kerbal and Minmus, they are pulling on us at a constant rate. Right now, the game doesn't see Minmus. We are not being pulled by Minmus in any way. But what this means is then we will only be pulled by Minmus and no longer pulled by Kerbal. Once we hit this change, you will see this nav ball flip, and our orbit speed should change as well, because we will no longer be orbiting Kerbal at 68 meters a second. We'll actually be orbiting Minmus at a different speed because we're coming in below and speeding across its axis. This change will happen in 5 minutes, so I'll just use time acceleration to get us within those 5 minutes. Don't want to blast through it, so don't go too aggressive. And we will go, here we go, 10 seconds. We will see this change, this nav ball change, and we will see the orbit speed change. 3, 2, 1, bam. So now we are being pulled by Minmus. You can tell because our orbit prediction is going around Minmus and telling us when we are going to leave. And we're moving at 236 meters a second. So now what we need to do in order to be captured by Minmus, because at this point we're going to fly right by and then fall back into the planet and actually crash because we have no periapsis. If we left things alone as of now, we are going to return home, which we don't want. We want to land. So at the periapsis, where we are going to be influencing our orbit the most, we want to left click, we want to add a maneuver, and instead of speeding up by pulling this, we actually want to slow down by pulling this. As we pull our maneuver node, you see the Minmus escape time actually grow from 5 hours 9 minutes to 5 hours 58 minutes. What this means is we are passing by Minmus much slower. And that's what we want. Minmus doesn't have the pull of Kerbal, so if we shot by at even 200 meters a second, it will not capture us, unlike Kerbal, who would just pull us in and smash us into the ground with much flair. We want to pull and pull and pull. The orbit starts wrapping around. If we keep slowing down, we will ultimately be captured. So if we went 133 meters a second backwards, essentially slowing us down to 100 meters a second, we would be in an orbit of Minmus. We would never leave Minmus. What we would like to do is sort of circularize so we can pick and choose our landing. So we can keep pulling and keep pulling until we see the apoapsis and periapsis flip, or at least go to the side. So we're slowing down, we're slowing down, we're slowing down, we're slowing down, and there, they moved. If they are completely left and right to our orbit, we're pretty circular, 103,000 to 100,000. That is going to take just a 2-second burn to kill off 171 meters a second. So let us do that. We will left click past the node and warp to the next maneuver. And it is going to speed us up to Minmus, close to our periapsis. We're going. And now we are about a minute away. We can tell our pilot, Valentina, to turn on the SAS, point to the maneuver node. The spacecraft will now flip around backwards and essentially slow us down. And at 1 second, T-minus 1 second, we go full throttle, and then we're pretty much going to be right off the throttle as well. For intents and purposes, I'm going to rotate the spacecraft with Q and E to get a solar panel facing the sun to where we can start actually trying to grow our electric charge, because right now she's holding it in a stable manner, but it's using charge on the battery. All right, so let's carrot up to T minus 10. Once we get down to 1, we are essentially going to be full throttle and then off the throttle. 2, 1, full throttle. Okay, so the maneuver node was a little bit off. I thought that sounded funny, but no worries. 30, 20, 10, cut. Turn off SAS, turn off our maneuver node, and let's see what happens. So there we are. We are in an orbit around Minmus, 105 by 101, and we can sort of plot our landing. We want to land on the light side of Minmus. If we try to land in the darkness, we won't be able to see our shadow. We won't be able to see the surface. And ideally, what we want to do is land in this area here, this dry lake that you see that is completely flat. This is helpful because this is at 0 sea level on our altimeter, so we can get a true reading on how high we are. If we tried to land on one of these mountains, we might actually land at, say, 10,000 meters or something like that. So what we want to do is, of course, because we want to bring this side of the orbit down, we actually want to slow down over here. So we add another maneuver, and we want to slow down. The periaps is going to drop on this side, and we want to go about 15,000 meters or so. Well, 11 is good. I don't believe there is any mountains that are that high up on Minmus. Don't take this for a grain of salt. It's just an approximation. Definitely, before you arrive at a new planet, sort of get on the wiki and see what the highest point of a planet is so you can plan your periaps accordingly. So once again, we will tell Valentina to turn to the maneuver node, which she will. And then we are going to time accelerate until we get to T minus 1 second or so. Don't want to overdo it. We don't want to be overzealous. Now you see we're stationary. If we were to burn right here on the maneuver node, it's saying, hey, wait, we're flying away from the planet. But what it's doing is we will actually be retrograde, and we're actually going to turn around to the back side of the planet. So when we are perpendicular to the planet, we are perfectly retrograde, and our maneuver node will actually line up to our backwards facing node, which is pretty cool stuff. So we'll slow down. Make sure she's on the ball. Just 5 times time acceleration. We want to drop to T minus 10 and then get ready to fire. Normal speed. Here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. A little bit. Let's just finish off the maneuver. And there. 0. SAS off and maneuver node cut. So let's see what we did. We did in fact come here to 6,000 meters, and it seems to be falling, which I don't understand why that is. We should be in a stable orbit. It looks like we have a little bit of thrust on, and it was. It was. Okay. So lesson learned. Now, if you overshoot, this is perfect. If you overshoot and you think, crap, I've done too much, what do I do? Well, we're facing retrograde here. So if we were to do the opposite and face prograde, she will flip back 180 degrees, and we can just add a little bit more thrust, raise up our periaps to our intended 10,000 meters, and then cut the throttle again. So a good catch by me. And it looks like we may get around in time for the planet to rotate under us and get those dry lakes under us. If not, we can always slow down and choose our landing a little bit better. But this is going to work out well for us. The planet is rotating, and we're nearing our periapsis. Now, we will be at our fastest point here, but we can sort of plot our landing from here. So say we wanted to go out here, 56 seconds, we add a maneuver. Of course, we want to slow down. So essentially, we just want to point it to where we will be landing roughly there. So a 7-second burn to get down to the surface. We are really close now. We want to turn on SCS, go to the maneuver node, and we want to wait until T minus 3. So we'll speed up a bit. 6, 5, 4, 3, burn it, That camera flip means we are landing, or at least going to hit the surface at some point. All right, SAS off. And now that we are primed for landing, we are falling to the surface. What I would like you to do is left click from orbit to surface. And what that is going to do is, instead of saying where we are relative in our orbit, this is our speed compared to the actual surface. How it takes away the rotation of Minmus from our orbit speed so we can exactly see how we're doing. Might as well drop the landing gear. Our landing gear deploys and we're ready to go. One thing you can do when you're in surface mode is you can turn on SES and you can go retrograde, because this is the direction that the rocket is actually falling. So now, because we're over a dry lake, we know we are 10,000 meters away from landing. A good rule of thumb is to take this and divide it by 100. So at 10,000 meters, you want to be going 100 meters a second. At 9,000 meters, you want to be going 90 meters a second, and so on. Which we're not up there yet, so we're not going to fire. At 8,000, we need to be going 80, which we're picking up speed, we're getting close. And at 70,000, we want to be going 70. So right now, essentially, we are on speed. So we just want to sort of modulate the throttle a bit. A suicide burn would be ideal, but for a beginner, don't try to do a suicide burn. We have plenty of fuel here in reserve to land and get back home. No need to force it. So at 6,000, I'll just use a little bit of thrust to slow down to 60 meters a second and then cut the throttle. At 5,000 meters a second, I'm going to slow down again to 50 meters a second. And you can sort of see our retrograde marker coming to the center of the nav ball. Try to point straight up and down. Essentially, that's where we want to be. Now, if you wanted to kill your velocity, what you can do is you can actually turn on just stability, point away from the marker, put the marker between you and vertical, and just give it a little thrust. That is going to push the marker towards the center, and once it gets into the center, cut it right there. Just X, which I did not do. I think I did. Let me see. So if we go retrograde, we are in fact falling straight down. So that is how you kill your velocity. So now we're coming straight down. We are in retrograde. Let me just turn on stability assist because I want to be coming straight down. I don't want to be changing this orientation. And here's our shadow. When you are above the surface at this height, it's sort of like an anticipated shadow. It's not like a real shadow. This shadow will disappear on its own just for a brief moment, and then we will actually see a graphically drawn shadow to give us a better representation of what is actually going on. So at 2,000 meters, I'll be going 20. Now, Minmus is very, very low on the gravity, so you do not want to go full throttle while landing here at all. You will fly back up, and that's not what you want to do for landing. So here we go. We are coming down. Let's just modulate our throttle just a little bit, going to 10% to 20 meters a second, and we'll cut it. There's our shadow. Always look for your shadow. You can see the sun coming from this direction, so you want to rotate and look down on the ground to find your shadow. We are at 800 meters above the surface now. There's our shadow getting bigger, so we're going to slow down just a little bit. Just like real life, whenever our shadow touches us, we will be on the ground, so the shadow will be meeting the spacecraft. The shadow will change here in a moment. Let's slow down. There goes the shadow change. It goes under the terrain, and now we have a very graphically processed shadow. Let's slow down to 10 meters, just using a little bit of throttle. And at this point, I think we can cut it and actually fall. Let's just give it a little bit more. Cut the throttle. Don't let the speed change, and then just drop. SAS off. Let the spacecraft settle. It is on a tripod, so it will settle nice and easy. The landing legs are down, and we are down on the surface. Now, if you would like, you can extend this ladder by right-clicking, extending the ladder. The little light comes on. The ladder drops down to the surface. And let's get Valentina out. So let's walk her around. Click EVA. And then you can hit space to let go. Or you can just hold the S key and climb down the ladder. She will climb all the way down. You can hit spacebar to let go of the ladder. She'll fall, but Kerbals right themselves. Once they get on the ground and they're stationary, they'll right themselves, and then you can use W, A, S, and D to walk around. You can see how low the gravity is here on Minmus. You can hit the spacebar to jump, and you can see how high she flies just by jumping. This is, just a regular jump. Now, if you want to slow down, just like the EVA controls, you can hit R and use your shift key to cancel out your thrust here. And then once she sits down, you can hit the R key, turn off your RCS, and continue on. You can also plant a flag by right-clicking on your Kerbal and click Plant Flag. Valentina will pull out the flag, put it down in the salt flats, and there's our flag. And you can even put a plaque. So congrats on your first landing. And then you can put whatever text you want. And when you click OK, that flag will now stay there for all eternity, or until you get rid of it. But that is going to do it for me in this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Valentina is on the ground and looking awesome. Next time we are going to go home, and I will show you how to essentially plot a course to get back to the Kerbal Space Center. And then after that, we might try landing on the moon, or we might try some docking. And then we will set our sights further out to Duna or Eve and interplanetary travel. So that's going to do it for me. If you learned something with this video, like, share, and subscribe if you are so bold. And for Valentina, I will see you in the next Kerbal Space Program tutorial video. Take care.